PR Connections Radio presents.
Welcome to Vegas Hockey Hub here on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rachiele. And on this edition, we are going to be continuing with our series of doing player profiles. And on this episode, we are going to talk about Henderson Silver Knights defenseman Dysin Mayo. As Dysin Mayo, he is kind of a recent tenured player with the Vegas Golden Knights organization. He is entering his second year with the Vegas Golden Knights. So when it comes to Dysin Mayo, a very interesting story, and how he got to the Vegas Golden Knights is a interesting storyline in itself. So on this episode of Vegas Hockey Hub, we are going to be doing this player profile and breaking down and talking about Dysin Mayo. Now, when it comes to the Victoria, British Columbia-born defenseman, his start of his career and his tenure begins in the Western Hockey League, as in 2012, he would begin his tenure with the Edmonton Oil Kings out there in the Western Hockey League. And when it comes to Dysin Mayo, those first 2 years, the Edmonton Oil Kings, they would go far in the playoffs. They would have a far run, but let's stay with one season at a time. As in 2012-2013 with the Edmonton Oil Kings, this would be a 2012-2013 season where the Oil Kings, they would end up, making it as the number one seed in the Western Hockey League out in their bracket. And then they would advance to the conference semifinals as the number one seed, would sweep Medicine Hat in the second round, move on to the conference finals against Calgary, and would win in a 7-game series. And then they would lose in the Western Hockey League Championship to the Portland Winterhawks. Now, what is fascinating about the Edmonton Oil Kings is that in that 2012-2013, Dysin Mayo, he plays over 40 games in his first year playing junior hockey. He only had 5 points, 1 goal during that time. And then he would play in 19 playoff games for the Oil Kings that year. Did not register a goal, but had 4 points in 19 games. So that was really his first start as a junior hockey league player in the Western Hockey League. But for the Edmonton Oil Kings to go all the way to the Western Hockey League Championship, that is pretty remarkable. Now, I do want to mention one thing about that Edmonton Oil Kings team from 2012. There is some good talent that is on this team. You have Curtis Lazar, who has ended up being a good, solid NHLer. He was on this organization. You had Keegan Lowe, who has become a defenseman. He's played in professional hockey for a while. Griffin Reinhart, who Vegas Golden Knights fans may remember that name. That Griffin Reinhart was part of the expansion draft, and the Vegas took him from the Edmonton Oilers. You also, on this team, you have some good talent on this organization. Mason Gearston, who is now his teammate with the Henderson Silver Knights, he was on that team as well. And the 2 goaltenders for the Edmonton Oil Kings in the year they made it to the Western Hockey League Championship would be former Vegas Golden Knights goaltender Laurent Brossoit and current Pittsburgh Penguins goaltender Tristan Jarry. So that was a real stacked 2012-2013 team with the Edmonton Oil Kings. Now, in the 2013-2014 season, this would be his second year. He would play almost every single game for Edmonton that year. And in 63 games, his stats would improve. He had 7 goals and 35 points and racked up around 50 penalty minutes for the Edmonton Oil Kings. But this is what mattered the most. In that 2013-2014 season in the Western Hockey League, they would end up winning the Western Hockey League Championship, as they would in the first round as a number 1 seed in their bracket. They would sweep Prince Albert. Second round, they would take on the Brandon Wheat Kings, which has a good connection to the Vegas Golden Knights. in 5 games in the second round. Then they would take on Medicine Hat for the second year in a row, would beat them in 5 games in their conference final, and then in a rematch of the year prior in the Western Hockey League Championship, the Edmonton Oil Kings in 7 games would beat the Portland Winterhawks and would move on to the Memorial Cup. Now, what is fascinating about all of that, all right, is that when it came to the Memorial Cup that year, the Edmonton Oil Kings would be in the 2014 Memorial Cup, and in just 3 games that year, they would have 1 win, 2 losses, and would finish 3rd in the Memorial Cup. It would be won by the Storm in the Ontario Hockey League. That's who won the Memorial Cup that year. But for Dysin Mayo himself, he played in 21 postseason games in the 2014 Western Hockey League playoffs / Memorial Cup, and he would have 3 goals and 15 points in 21 games, and that caught the attention of the NHL as he would declare for the NHL draft the very next year. Now, I do want to mention about that Western Hockey League championship team from the Edmonton Oil Kings. They stayed their roster sort of the same from the year before. But what is fascinating about this organization is that when you come and you talk about Dysin Mayo, he was one of the leaders on defense in terms of stats that year. So he relatively did a good job at 17 years old playing for the Edmonton Oil Kings. Now, heading over to the 2014 NHL draft, and in the 5th round, in the same round, a defenseman like Gustav Forsling would end up getting drafted a few picks before him. Dysin Mayo would find his NHL home as the Arizona Coyotes would select him in the 5th round, and he would end up being signed to an entry-level contract with the Arizona Coyotes. Now, this is a guy who signed, a 3-year deal. It would start in 2015, so essentially would be on an entry-level deal starting in 2015, 1 year later. But what would end up with the Edmonton Oil Kings in the final 2 years really helped Dysin Mayo, as in his 14-15 season, which would be his 3rd year playing in Edmonton, he would play in 72 games for the Edmonton Oil Kings. He would rack up over a dozen goals for Edmonton. He would score over 50 points and rack up over 70 penalty minutes for the Edmonton Oil Kings that year. So all of his stats reached a career high in that 2014-2015 season. And then in the playoffs that year, unfortunately, they did not have the same success as they did the year previously, as they would end up having one of the lower seeds in the Western Hockey League playoffs that year, and they would get bounced in 5 games to the Brandon Wheat Kings in the 1st round of the Western Hockey League playoffs. So for the Edmonton Oil Kings to go from winning the Western Hockey League championship the year prior to getting bounced in the 1st round, that is not the best thing for the organization. Now, 2015-2016, the final year of Dysin Mayo playing junior hockey, and this would end up being a solid year for him, as he would play in 71 games for Edmonton. He would rack up half a dozen goals, keep the same amount of assists, and put up just over 40 points on the year. So his stats did go down compared to the year before, but the one thing that did go up was his penalty minutes, as he racked up over 80 penalty minutes in that full year with the Edmonton Oil Kings. And in that 2015-2016 season, kind of rinse and repeat, unfortunately, as they would be eliminated once again as the lower seed in the Western Hockey League playoffs, and by the same team 2nd year in a row, the Brandon Wheat Kings would eliminate them in the 1st round, this time in 6 games. So for Dysin Mayo, his final tenure and his numbers playing for the Edmonton Oil Kings of the Western Hockey League, this is a guy in Dysin Mayo who played 248 games playing for Edmonton in those 4 years. He also racked up 28 goals during that tenure in Edmonton. He would have a total points in Edmonton in 134 points. So if you really want to think about it, in 248 games, divide that by 134, he more or less averaged a half a point per game in his junior hockey career with the Edmonton Oil Kings. And when it comes to penalty minutes, this is where it kind of shines for him, as he had over 220 penalty minutes in his career with the Edmonton Oil Kings. Now, when it comes to his playoff numbers in the Western Hockey League, he played in over 50 Western Hockey League playoff games. He would have 3 goals and 18 assists, where that would get him 21 points in his playoff career playing in the Western Hockey League. So, when you talk about Dysin Mayo, he had a successful run playing junior hockey. He put up, like I said, half a point per game, but it would be over after 2015-2016. His entry-level deal would start during that 15-16 season, and his professional hockey run would start now. So to start out the professional tenure of his career when it comes to Dysin Mayo, as we're doing our player profile here on prconnectionsradio.com, the voice of new media, he would be in AA in the ECHL. As with the Arizona Coyotes, he would be a part of the Rapid City Rush. And here's a little fun fact for Golden Knights fans. He would be on the same team as a certain goaltender who is now in the Vegas Golden Knights, as Adin Hill would make select starts in the ECHL the same year that Dysin Mayo would get his start in the ECHL. So that's kind of a fun fact there. Now, in only 25 games he would play in his ECHL AA tenure, he would score 1 goal, rack up 16 points in the ECHL. And after that tenure was over, you would get to the AHL side of Dysin Mayo's career. And after a short 5-game stint in his first season playing in the AHL, he would have a bigger role in season 2, as he would have 25 games, his first ever goal in the AHL, and would get 2 assists with the Tucson Roadrunners, which is still part of the Arizona Coyotes. Now, interesting enough, Adin Hill would be part of his AHL tenure with the Arizona Coyotes. So that 5-game stint he had his first season, Adin Hill was on that roster. His second season, when he plays 25 games, Adin Hill is the goaltender out there in Tucson. But, first 2 seasons, 1 goal and 4 points, that isn't outstanding, right? That's nothing that you're going to kind of look at and say, wow, that is incredible. But his first full-time season where he played 90% of the season is when Dysin Mayo would really have a breakout moment. As in 2017-2018 with the Tucson Roadrunners, he would play in 66 games, all of this from HockeyDB.com. He would have 5 goals and 16 points, plus he would rack up over 40 penalty minutes with Tucson that year. And for this Tucson Roadrunners team, this is the same organization who would have Dylan Strome, Michael Bunting, Connor Garland. Like, there is some good talent that were on Tucson in that 2017-2018 team. And for Dysin Mayo, 21, 22 years old at this point in time, this was good for him. Adin Hill, the full-time goaltender with the Tucson Roadrunners in 2017-2018, that would be the connection there. And then you also have to sit here and look at certain things. For example, when it comes to the penalty minutes, Dysin Mayo would be second on the team in penalty minutes. And this is a guy in Dysin Mayo who did relatively well. Now, his first time being in the Calder Cup playoffs would be in 2017-2018, as the Tucson Roadrunners would make it out of the Western Division, and they would play in the West as the number 1 seed in the Pacific. And after beating San Jose in the first round, they would move on to the second round into the division final. They would take on the Texas Stars and would lose in the second round. Now, for Dysin Mayo, this was really uneventful in his first Calder Cup playoffs, as he would have 0 points in 7 games for the Tucson Roadrunners. But hey, it's his first action of him being in the Calder Cup playoffs. Now, continuing his role in the AHL, okay? Dysin Mayo, this would end up being a 2018-2019 season. He would play 67 games. He would rack up 2 goals and only 6 points, but would stay around 40 penalty minutes on the year in Tucson. I mean, when it comes to Dysin Mayo, this is a guy who, when you look at his AHL run and you look at his stats and everything, he could be an everyday player in the AHL. Stat-wise, you're not going to look at him and say, wow, this is a future NHLer. But what you're going to say is that he could be an everyday AHLer, and there's always a value to that when it comes to hockey. Now, that 2018-2019 season, this is kind of interesting because when you look at the roster that they had at that point, not only is Connor Garland and Michael Bunting still there, but you also are starting to get some of the younger guys on that team as well. And it's a really young roster. You have your 18, 19, 20-year-olds that are just starting to get in there. Also, kind of a fun fact, Calvin Pickard, who was the first pick in Vegas Golden Knights expansion draft history, he would actually be in the AHL, and he would be in the net for Tucson in 2018-2019. And Aiden Hill, for the second year in a row, would be the starting goaltender during that 2018-2019 season. So, interesting enough for Dysin Mayo, his first 4 seasons he plays in the AHL, Aiden Hill, who's with Vegas right now, would be on that roster. When he was in the ECHL for that one partial season, Aiden Hill would be on that roster. Now, 2019-2020, Dysin Mayo, he would play less games, about 58 games. Once again, getting all my research from HockeyDB.com. And then he would get 4 goals and 12 points. His penalty minutes, that would go down. But his plus-minus would arguably be the best of his career, as he would be a plus 24, the best on the entire roster. So when it comes to Dysin Mayo, his plus-minus would be his notable point when it came to the 2019-2020 season, him leading the team in plus-minus. I also have to mention that when it comes to the Tucson Roadrunners in that 2019-2020 season, you would have a former Golden Knights AHL player be on that team, as Bo Bennett, who was in the Chicago Wolves in 2017-2018. He would be on Tucson in 2019-2020, the 2 years after being with the Vegas Golden Knights organization out there in the AHL. Now, overall, when you see the roster of the Tucson Roadrunners, there are guys who have graduated at this point. The goaltending is still insane. You have Antti Raanta, you have Darcy Kemper, Aiden Hill is still there. He played well over 20 games at that point. But overall, Dysin Mayo playing every single day for them, it ended up being a situation where Dysin Mayo ended up being their everyday guy as the pandemic was just starting. And speaking of the pandemic, during the 2020 season for the Tucson Roadrunners, Dysin Mayo would play in all but one game for Tucson that year. He would get 1 single goal, have less than 5 points on the year, and had about 20 penalty minutes. So when it came to that one season, there isn't much of note that you can talk about. Michael Carcone, he was there, who is still a member of this organization out there to this day. You had Barrett Hayton, who a lot of people know are still part of that roster to this day. So this is an organization that was really starting to kind of develop what they were trying to do out there in Tucson, and he was a part of that. And in 2021, 2022, Dysin Mayo, after a 2-game stint in the AHL, he would get his moment as Dysin Mayo. After would play, 26 games in his final season in the AHL, playing with the Tucson Roadrunners, but he would not only make his Arizona Coyotes debut on October 21st, 2021, but he would also end up playing a considerable amount of games in the NHL with the Arizona Coyotes that season. Now, this is from hockeyreference.com, but when it comes to Dysin Mayo making his debut and actually having his game logs for that season, Dysin Mayo would have 67 games in Arizona in his age 25 season. He would have 4 goals, 8 assists for 12 points in his first season in the NHL. And when it comes to his scoring logs, which we do appreciate Hockey Reference for, Dysin Mayo would score in his debut with the Arizona Coyotes, and he would end up scoring 3 more after that. And funny enough, he would score off a future Hall of Famer and a Vegas Golden Knights legend in Marc-Andre Fleury as his second ever goal in the NHL. So for Dysin Mayo, after that 2021-2022 season that he spent 2 games in Tucson and then spent 67 games in Phoenix, he would end up splitting the 2022-2023 season between Tucson and Arizona. Now, I do want to mention that he would be selected as the team captain with Tucson. So throughout his 7 years in Tucson, at the back end of it, he would end up being the captain, being named team captain for the Tucson Roadrunners. And he would also get a contract extension in the 2022 season, as he would sign a 3-year deal just under $3 million with the Arizona Coyotes. And this would be the final year that he would be with Arizona, as after playing 15 games for Arizona, racking up 0 goals and 0 points, and in Tucson, having 2 goals and 7 points in 26 games, Dysin Mayo would end up on the move, as during the 2022-2023 season, the Arizona Coyotes would ship Dysin Mayo to your Vegas Golden Knights in exchange for Shea Weber and a 5th-round pick. Now, when it came to the Shea Weber deal, that was his contract. He was on a long-term IR. He was never going to play ever again in his career. But this was somebody who, after spending over 7 years in Arizona to get traded over to the Golden Knights organization and traded for a 5th-round pick, which, by the way, I do appreciate getting this information. The Vegas Golden Knights trading that 5th-round pick to the Arizona Coyotes, they would get the 160th pick in the draft that year, and they would select a defenseman in Justin Kipke from Canada. He actually is from the Victoria Royals of the Western Hockey League. So the team that is based in Victoria, British Columbia, would be a player that would be the pick they would get for the Victoria, British Columbia-born Dysin Mayo. I love how everything always intertwines. Now, in the rest of the 2022-2023 season, Dysin Mayo would play in the final 17 games of the season for the Henderson Silver Knights. He would get 1 goal and 4 points in those 17 games, and he would not make the playoffs. The Henderson Silver Knights would not make playoffs that year. And then Dysin Mayo, during the 2023-2024 season, he would get called up to Vegas twice as a healthy scratch. And there's actually an interesting video of Dysin Mayo skating around during the Winter Classic with the Vegas Golden Knights. So for Dysin Mayo, he did spend a little bit of time in Vegas, but he also was an everyday guy with the Henderson Silver Knights. As this past year, he had 67 games played, 5 goals, 25 points, and around 80 penalty minutes with the Henderson Silver Knights. Now, when it comes to the Dysin Mayo Henderson Silver Knights tenure so far with the Vegas Golden Knights, this is what his numbers look like. With the Henderson Silver Knights, Dysin Mayo has played 84 games. He has racked up 6 goals, 23 assists for 29 points in his 2 seasons playing with the Henderson Silver Knights. He has also racked up 87 penalty minutes with the Henderson Silver Knights organization, and he has a -9 plus-minus. So for Dysin Mayo, so far in his career, he is a player who has become an everyday AHLer. He is a good defenseman you can have in Henderson. You can call him up to Vegas if you need to. But overall, with Dysin Mayo, this is a player who is going to be entering soon his year 27 season. And, he spent 7 years in Arizona. He is year 2 in Vegas. So after 9 seasons playing professional hockey, I will say with Dysin Mayo, and I know some people are going to look at this and kind of scoff at it, but he at least played 82 games in the NHL, which would be the equivalent of 1 full season in the NHL. And not many 5th-round picks can say that they played just a little under 100 NHL games. I mean, regardless of him only scoring 4 goals and 12 points in his tenure in the NHL, that doesn't matter. This is a guy who spent 80 games in the NHL, scored a couple of goals in the NHL, and he has spent 9 years making a living playing professional hockey at a pro level. So for Dysin Mayo, this is a player that I wanted to talk about for a while. I thought that his career was really interesting, and I just wanted to cover it here on Vegas Hockey Hub. Now, until next time, I'm your host, Ian Rachiele, and thank you for watching Vegas Hockey Hub and everything that we do. And until next time, have a good one. Keep watching hockey. Go support junior hockey, and go Knights, go.
PR Connections Radio thanks you for watching this podcast. Check out more episodes of this show and our others at prconnectionsradio.com.